folks, Josh Knight the First here with another episode of Writer Rewind, coming to you with episode 10 of the series. Let's get right into it. So this week on Kamen Rider Geo, we're seeing more of the O's arc here, and now, not O's arc, O's arc. And we're starting to get to understand a little bit more about Sogo as he's developing these ideas of what exactly means to be a good, evil overlord. I appreciate that in this episode we actually address that issue through the character of Eiji. We probably should check in on him since he seems to have been captured at the end of last week. Now I know a lot of people were talking about this in last week's episode, that they were kind of worried that they changed a very specific thing about Hina's character carrying over from O's, and that for some reason she's just naturally freakishly strong. Well, apparently that holds up here, she just had no reason to show it last episode. Now that she's been captured and placed in the same room with Eiji, they need to go ahead and break out, so she uses that strength to get them out of there. Now I do appreciate that even in this series, they never explain why that is, and I appreciate that actual holdover. And speaking of holdovers, I do appreciate that over the course of this episode, we do realize that this is actually an episode that was written by one of the main writers for O's, and they're doing it again here in Geo. So this is a very O-centric episode, not just because, yeah, this is the toy we're selling right now, but we see that Eiji has a very meaty part. And the thing of it is, we don't get to have that with every writer that we see come back, but really we see a lot of caretaking to make sure that the tenets of Eiji's character, what makes him the writer that he is, are still holding over even if there's been time changes. A good chunk of this episode is going to be the diametric opposition between Kuroto Dan and his way of ruling, and then Eiji in the way he not necessarily wants to rule. He wants to get into politics, but not to rule. He wants to help people, and that's something that's always been important to his character. Now Sogo, the way he's going about this is he questions them directly. What do you want to do with your power? What do you want to do for people? What is it that actually drives you? Now for what it's worth, I think it makes a lot of sense that Sogo is asking these questions to Kuroto and to Eiji, but at the same time, a lot of this should be pretty no-duh. You shouldn't have to ask the guy who's summoning monsters whether or not he actually wants to help people. It's pretty obvious he just summoned monsters. But if he didn't do that, that would give us no reason to have Kuroto monologue like he does. His actor absolutely loves his character and actually loves chewing up the scenery like he does. So we go ahead and let him do that because really that's why we wanted to see him here. We wanted to see him do that again, just like he did in Kamen Rider Eiji. Now back over on the other side of town, over at Sogo's uncle's house, we see that Tsukuyomi has that, future iPad, but apparently it can heal wounds. That would have been a nice thing to know about sooner, but I guess that's just technology they decided to bring with them and not mention to Sogo. Fine. But what we're seeing here is that Geiz is still kind of butthurt from last week, and he just sees all of this as confirmation that he's actually witnessing Sogo becoming the evil overlord that he knows he will eventually becoming Omagio. But the thing of it is, we're given this new wrench in the works as far as Geiz's characterization, as he sees maybe he's been too soft on Sogo. Maybe he's actually thinking he might be friends with him. And I don't see any of that characterization in him in the last 10 episodes. All this time he's been giving Sogo a hard time about something he hasn't done yet, and here he's just finding excuses to rationalize why he still thinks this. Now while Geiz goes off in his one-man crusade to go ahead and end Sogo, we see that Tsukuyomi is starting to debate whether or not she actually believes that Sogo can be turned to good or will become Omagio. Now after a conversation with Sogo's uncle, she realizes that she has to make this decision for herself, but I do want to talk about the uncle for a second. So he's been giving a lot of plot-driving advice over the course of the last 10 episodes, not so much that he knows what's going on. The whole joke here is that he has no idea what's going on with his grandnephew, but the thing of it is, does he know more than he's letting on, or is this just one of those other side characters that we see for like 2 seconds and they'll say something, but that's all there is to their character? I kind of wish that he had a little bit more development than saying, hey, can you get some chicken? I mean, chicken's important, but I wish there was more to him than just chicken. Now once Sogo has heard from Kuroto, he decides to ask Eiji, so what do you want to do with power? And the thing of it is, the very important thing is that if you haven't watched Kamen Rider Rose, there was an inciting incident for Eiji that led him to want to be a wanderer and a vagrant, stemming back to his time in a southern country. I believe it was Africa. I should have looked that up before I started the video. But there was a little girl in a small village that he couldn't save that was being bombed due to civil war at the time. And because of that, because he was reaching out to her and he couldn't help her, that drove him to want to go around and help people in any way that he could and not want to accept, cash or money or things like that, just what he needed so long as he had tomorrow's underwear. Now, from what we're seeing here in Geo, even though he doesn't have the power of Kamen Rider O's anymore, that incident still happened. But because the Kogami Foundation isn't there, because he never ran into Ankh, he still decided to go ahead and pursue politics, which means he can still help people, but he's doing it in a more realistic way. What's nice about that is that even with these time changes, he's still the same core character. It's not like the build episodes where Sento, now becoming Katsuragi, isn't very much like his character anymore. Here, that character is still the same person. Eiji is the same Eiji that you see in O's, he just doesn't have his powers. Now, to that end, Eiji does question Sogo as to why exactly he feels this kind of glorious purpose that he feels like he has to become king at some point. So thankfully somebody has questioned him on that. But he does give him a little bit of advice, telling him you can't do things on your own. Now really what that means is that you need to reach out for other people who are willing to help you and can help you in certain situations. That was a big message, probably the main message over there in Kamen Rider O's. And over here, that's actually what's going to keep Sogo in check, and he realizes this. And now that he's heard from both sides of the story, now he can make his own decision, which leads him to go ahead and rebel against Kuroto-dan and go ahead and fight him one-on-one. Now we did have one small fight of Geo versus Gates again in this episode, but really that was just to get Gates to this idea of, maybe Sogo's not so bad right this second. But really the main portion of the fights that we're going to see in this episode are in the second half, and this is going to see another O's taking on Geo directly, but there's interference again from one of the Time Jackers. Now before, when we saw using one of the Time Majins with the power of the Captain Ghost from Kamen Rider Ghost, here for some reason we see Ora showing up with Castle Doran, which is the helper, not really robot, just the helper giant thing from Kamen Rider Kiva. Now for those of you who haven't seen that series, it is what it looks like. It's a building with a dragon hiding inside of it. Now what I find is interesting is that before, when we saw the Time Majins show up, it showed up and then it attached part of itself to be more like the Captain Ghost. Like Captain Ghost showed up, Time Majin, two separate things. But here what we saw is Castle Doran show up and then it transformed into a Time Majin. So I don't know why that is. It's a little inconsistent. Now for what it's worth, the fight between the two Time Majins was pretty good. You can see that the mocapping is top level and we actually buy that they're actually moving like humanoid robots. But of course this is a good time for Sogo to go ahead and utilize the two ride watches that he did get from Eiji, the Tatoba combo, basically main form O's, and Tajador combo, which is the all-red bird combo. Between the two, Tajador seems to have more power to it and is able to copy the prominence drop rider kick that the Tajador combo for O's can utilize, and he uses that to get away from Ora and get back to 2010. Now thankfully during the course of the episode, Tsukiyomi figured out just exactly why Kuroto is a bad guy. It's not just that he rules people, he kills people, and in this version of the timeline, he's actually gotten to the point of killing his father, Masamune-dan, who some of you might remember from Kamen Rider Egg's-Aid. He becomes the Kamen Rider known as Cronus. So apparently the way this broke down is in 2010, showed up to a younger Kuroto-dan and kind of made him think that he had god powers for like a split second, but gives him the power of another O's, and eventually he used this power to off his dad. Now thankfully immediately after that, that is when Sogo shows up to go ahead and challenge him directly. You will never be king so long as I'm here, kind of flipping the script on him from what he said to him last week. Now I do want to mention that when another O's power is given to Kuroto-dan, again we're seeing that this takes place during a specific episode, and for Kamen Rider O's, that's episode 3, which is the first and really only time that he uses the Tatoba kick, his rider kick for that series. Now of course the purpose of this fight is to show off the new ride watch and to give Geo a new form in the form of O's ride armor. Now there's two layers to this fight. There's the meaning behind it, you know, the things that they're saying and the things that they're fighting for, and the fight itself. So as far as the words that are said, we see that Kuroto is kind of fighting to get out of this idea of trying to surpass his father, trying to be the best, trying to actually reach the god complex that's already going on within him. But at the same time, he challenges Sogo as to, well, I should be the leader, who are you to say that you should lead? Now for what it's worth, Sogo does want to answer that back like I'm the one who decides that, but he knows better at this point. He says no, the people of this era, Gates and Tsukiyomi, should be the ones to judge me at this point. He wants to be judged. That means he wants to be held accountable, which is actually a defining thing that would not let him be going down the road of an evil ruler. If he wants to be open to criticism, open to people telling him, hey, you're not doing a good job, that shows the tenets of a good leader, which is actually something we would hope he's learning early on that would help him not become Omagio later. Now as for the fight itself, it does a good job of recreating a lot of O's power, the jumps from the grasshopper part, the legs, the claws there on the Tora, the tiger parts, and then there's really nothing left to the hawk part. It's just kind of there for show. We didn't really have a chance to see like, oh, he's got hawk vision, like he went far away and he had to chase him. We really only have so much time for this episode, but we did get a nice kick. But what's interesting after that kick, after Sogo defeats Kuroto, is that the watch doesn't actually break. You see it there on the side of him, but usually they focus on it breaking. Here that didn't happen. We can only assume it did, but again, that's another inconsistency. And then after that, we're pretty much back to status quo. Woz is happy that there's more fertilizer for his king to grow in. We see that Sogo has to apologize to his uncle for not bringing home the chicken, and Geiz is going off to be moody. And that's pretty much where we're at going into next week's episode, where we're seeing a very Gaim-focused episode, and we're happy to get two of those riders back, both Baron and Gaim himself. So actually, I was very happy with this episode. O's was another one of those series that I really do enjoy, and again, I say if you have the chance, definitely go check that series out. You'll probably enjoy it. And I like that the characterizations carried over here, that Eiji is still essentially the same person. Hina is still essentially the same person, although I'm kind of weirded out by the fact that they didn't like team up at the end, like, hey, after everything's done, you want to like hang out or something. No, they just go back about their own business. I thought that was a little weird. And again, it's great to have Kuroto-dan's actor back. He loves the character so much. If there's another chance for him to come back in a year or even a couple of months, he absolutely would do it. I'm a little disappointed by the fact that we still don't have an explanation for where the Hawk Watchroid came from. We see that it's hovering around Sogo, and I know a lot of people were theorizing maybe Eiji sent it out, but Eiji only had 2 of the ride watches, and he didn't really have time to explain whether or not he had an extra one that was given to him, which would mean that Sogo would have had to have had it to give to him, and it's that whole cyclical thing, you know, the bootstrap paradox, but I'm not going to write it off to that. I'm just saying they forgot to say who it came from. I do appreciate that here we are effectively 1/5 of the way through the series. This is going really quick, and it gets quicker every year, it feels like, but I'm seeing that the CG is still pretty decent at this point. I imagine they put a lot of resources into that. I hope that stays consistent throughout the rest of the series, because sometimes when it weakens, the story kind of reflects that. Not often, but sometimes I see that happen, so I hope that's not the case here in Geo. But those are my thoughts on the episode. I want to hear what you guys thought in the comments below, so let's go ahead and talk about a few things. First off, Geiz actually taking care of another O's here in 2018. We know that Sogo went into the past to go ahead and take care of him there, but how exactly did Geiz defeat another O's here in the present? They never covered that. Secondly, Sogo himself. Do you think that he actually had the answers the whole time and he just wanted to confirm things, or is he really that naive and he really needed to hear from a good guy and a bad guy just what they were all about? And thirdly, because this was an O's focus episode, for those of you who have seen Kamen Rider O's, what's your favorite O's combo form change, full form change from that show? Was it Tajador, Gata Kiriba? What's your favorite one? Tell me in the comments below. And of course, during the week, you can always talk to me over on social media. On Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been episode 10 of Rider Rewind for episode 10 of Kamen Rider Geo, Hawk Tiger Grasshopper 2010. I'm Josh Knight the First. I'll see you guys again next episode.